Good afternoon. We are delighted to welcome you to our MIDEA Connect webinar today. The MIDEA community is built upon a common desire to learn about emerging technologies, experiment with new projects and ideas, and share successes with colleagues in a professional environment. In today's one-hour webinar, Koven Smith, Director of Technology at the Denver Art Museum, will lead a presentation on how to build an interpretive technology strategy from zero. I'm your host today, Alex Freeman, Associate Director of the Marcus Institute for Digital Education and the Arts, a partnership between the Edward and Betty Marcus Foundation and the NMC. Now on to the star of today's webinar, Koven Smith. Koven Smith is a composer, drummer, and director of technology at the Denver Art Museum. With over a decade's worth of experience in museums, Koven's focus has been on the transformation of museums from both functional and programmatic perspectives through the use of technology. Koven was also the co-principal investigator for the NMC Horizon Report 2012 Museum Edition. So take it away, Koven.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks to NMC and MIDEA for the opportunity to be here with you today. I really appreciate it. So today what we're going to be talking about is basically some techniques and strategies for building an interpretive technology strategy around an exhibition or programmatic goal with zero or virtually zero resources at your disposal. So to begin, what I want to do is kind of lay out our imagined scenario here, which will not be so imaginary to many of you in the audience. So here's what we're facing. You have an upcoming exhibition. It has been decreed that you should have an exhibition website, that the exhibition should have some sort of mobile thing, and that in addition to that, because of the importance of this particular exhibition, that it will need to have some sort of as yet undefined social media component to it, or components. Pretty typical. We have an upcoming programmatic goal, and around that are all these additional sort of ancillary goals that may or may not be particularly well defined. However, what are usually extremely well defined are constraints. And these will look very familiar to many of you, if not all of you, which is in basically putting together this proposal. You're told that you have no budget to work with. You will have no staff or contractors to work with you on it, so you'll have to do this yourself while you're also managing the cash register in the shop and maintaining the museum's HVAC system. And then on top of that, of course, the director expects this thing that you've created or are creating to be completely mind-blowing and awesome, and to totally change the game for this type of thing going forward. So pretty typical. In essence, we have a relatively tall order, albeit somewhat undefined, with virtually no resources with which to support that. So what we're going to talk about today are sorting out really what your real problems are, what your not real problems are, and figuring out how we can actually produce something like what's been asked for within these constraints. So let's talk about your apparent problems. When you first are handed this scenario, what you're likely to do is look at this and say, oh man, okay, well my biggest problem is that I don't have a web developer on board. I don't know how we're going to make a website. I don't have a social media person, so I don't even know what that's all about. I don't know how to what we're going to do there. And then on top of that, there's no way that we can afford to have somebody develop a mobile app for us. We don't have the money, and even if we did have the money, I probably myself won't have the time to put that together or to run that process. These are not your real problems, because there's free technology or near free technology that exists out there that can enable us to solve these problems, maybe not in an ideal way, but in a very practical way. However, our real problems are these. Scalability. So what happens if this thing that you create ends up being wildly successful and needs to continue on perhaps after the show is over, or needs to accommodate, you know, a lot more visitor comments. How are we going to make sure that this thing that we build or put together is scalable in an upward way? Another problem is maintenance. This is probably the biggest problem here, which is we often tend to design these sorts of things with trying to make sure that we get them ready to go for day one. But what happens when on day 57 we start to have maintenance problems? Who can actually accommodate these things? Who can actually take care of them? Who can solve these problems? These problems are often, or these concerns are often left unstated early on in the process. And then really related to these, the first two issues are long-term viability. So again, if this thing is so successful that we decide to keep it running, maybe even after this theoretical exhibition closes, how will we do that? And that's related to maintenance and then also scalability. So how can we ensure that this thing will continue to work flawlessly over the long haul, even when we're not there to put as much effort into it as we might during the initial ramp-up period? So in doing this, in basically building an interpretive technology strategy with virtually no resources, there are a few principles that we really need to follow here. And some of these are difficult for museums to overcome because we have something of a kind of print and publication mentality where we really want to make everything perfect and we want to make everything look absolutely wonderful. And sometimes that can trump our ability to make something that just works. So really what we're looking at here today is creating a strategy that is functional, something that really works. And functional will trump design any day of the week. Something that works is better than something that doesn't work that maybe looks prettier. We want something that's smart. Which is to say we need something that basically takes advantage of existing resources that are out there and leverages them in really intelligent ways. And so this means that we may not be leveraging resources that are ideal or perfect. So smart always trumps perfect. And also we're creating something that's lightweight. So what this means is something that we can maintain with a minimal investment of personnel resources, something that will basically run itself in a relatively maintenance-free way over the long term. And then probably our most important principle here, and this is one that will start to become more clear as we get further into this, is the idea of us creating loosely coupled services. So this is somewhat related to the SMART principle in the sense that instead of creating an end-to-end purpose-built solution, we're going to actually pull together a number of freely available resources and create an experience using all of those. So that'll become a little clearer, as I said, later on. But what this means is that in addition to us not having to build an end-to-end solution, it also means that we can make changes to different components of the experience without affecting the other components. So in looking at those loosely coupled services, one of the things that we really have to identify is looking at this information from a data standpoint and saying, where does the data originate and where is it going, and in what way is that data transformed in that movement? So rather than thinking about just the end result, we're thinking about both the end result, but also in addition, we're thinking about where it begins. So in the solution that we're going to put together today, you'll see we'll be creating data storehouses, and then that data will be used for multiple outputs. So some of it will be going to social media channels, some of it will be going to your website, some of it will be going to internal notifications that you use to follow up. So it's not just looking at the end result of the presentation, but also looking at the mechanics of it and how it works. So in the solution, the first thing we want to do is identify our primary interactions. So these will be the things that you're going to go over initially with your director, or maybe with the curator of the show, whoever's sort of in charge and has maybe made this initial request. And so here you're kind of basically putting together a list where you're saying, okay, these are all the things that are going to happen. These are the things that visitors will do. These are the things that staff members will need to do. And these will be the outputs. So I'll just walk through these really, really quickly, though you can obviously are probably reading them already. But initially what we want to do is have images of objects from the show sent automatically to the museum's Facebook page before the show starts to generate interest before the opening of this exhibition. While inside the museum, we want the visitor to be able to view information about objects in the show, presumably via a mobile device that they'll bring with them. As part of that interaction, the visitor will leave a question about a specific object for the curator of the show. In response to that, the curator will respond to the question and post that response both to the museum, or to the exhibition's website and to the museum's Tumblr blog. Additionally, we'll have some other visitor activities that we'd like to support. Visitors can record audio comments using Soundcloud and then post those. Those will appear in our Tumblr blog as well. And visitors will also take photos of the show and post those to Instagram. We'd also like those photos to show up in our Tumblr blog and potentially on the website as well. So what this means is that people who are unable to come to the show, or who merely just want to see what's going on after they visited the show or even before, can basically see a diary of all of the visitor activity in the show. So this would be comments that visitors leave, responses from curators, photos uploaded, sounds uploaded as well. So what we're going to be looking for is a way to, in essence, combine all of these things together in a relatively seamless way. Again, our focus here is that functional will always trump pretty. And so this will not be the most beautiful solution we've ever put together. But what it will be is something that works, and that hopefully will continue to work even if you go from having 2 people in the show a day making comments to 300 people in the show a day making comments, or 3,000 or more. So now that we've identified our interactions, what we want to do is identify kind of the moving parts, the software that we're going to use to accommodate these interactions. So here are major moving parts. So we have an asset management problem, which is we need a place to store images of the works of art that are going to be in this show and data about those works of art. We need a website, somewhere that we can basically present all of the information about that show. We need to accommodate visitor interaction. This would be the photo uploading. This would be viewing content while in the gallery, as well as uploading audio comments. Mobile content. The visitor needs to, while in the museum space, to be able to see all of this information. And then social interaction. So this would be commenting, Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc., etc. So today we won't have time to model all of these, but I'll give you a sense of kind of how some of these things would work so that you can go forth and build similar solutions on your own. So now that we've identified kind of the major functionality pieces, the moving parts, what we need to do is figure out which software we're going to actually use to accommodate this. So for asset management, for storing images, we're today going to be using Flickr. Flickr, as most of you are probably aware, is an online photo storage and sharing solution. It's been around for ages and ages and ages. There are other solutions that you could use, most notably probably Picasa from Google and others. Today we're going to be using Flickr just because I've used it forever and I'm fairly comfortable with it. And so we're going to be using Flickr to keep master copies of our images with some data about the objects that those images relate to. And for website presentation and mobile content, we're actually going to use WordPress. Many of you may be familiar with WordPress as a blogging tool. We're actually going to use a relatively lightweight version of WordPress, which is called WordPress.com, in which we can in a very quick and dirty manner set up a blog very quickly without having to set up any of the hosting for that ourselves. In addition, we're going to use plugins for WordPress that enable those posts to be viewed via a mobile device easily. We're not going to get too deep into this today, but you'll just as you experiment with WordPress on your own, if you haven't already, you notice that a lot of the themes used for WordPress enable just mobile display, or what we would call responsive design. There are also a number of plugins like WP Touch that you can use that will enable content to be viewed on mobile devices relatively easily. So additional services for visitor interaction. As mentioned earlier, one thing that we do want people to do is to be able to take and upload photos and take and upload audio content, audio comments. And so we're going to use a service called Soundcloud for the audio comments, and Instagram, which many of you may be familiar with, for images. Part of the reason for using these is that these are tools that people who are likely to do this kind of interaction in the space are probably already using on their mobile devices. So the advantage of using something like Instagram is if you're the kind of person who's likely to take photos and want to share them, probably you're already using Instagram anyway. So it's a service that people are familiar with, and essentially we can kind of piggyback on that service and get some interesting interaction out of that, essentially out of an activity that a visitor is already doing. SoundCloud is relatively similar. If you're the kind of person who's already comfortable with capturing and uploading sounds via your phone, sharing them, probably you're already using SoundCloud or something similar to it, such that the SoundCloud interface is not going to be totally crazy and alien for you. So for our social interaction, as mentioned earlier, we're going to use Tumblr and Facebook. I'm not really going to model the Facebook piece today, just because for various reasons it gets a little bit more complicated. But today we'll be looking at Tumblr as our primary means of social interaction. So we're going to use Tumblr to create our sort of daily diary of activity in the gallery space. Tumblr, again, like WordPress.com, is a sort of microblogging service that is externally hosted, so you can set a Tumblr blog up in minutes. You don't have to worry about creating additional hosting services or anything like that in order to get it going. So here's the big question, which is who's doing all the heavy lifting? How are we going to actually get all these things to work together? And there's really two pieces that are kind of critical to that. So I'll look at the one on the right first, which is our quick response codes, or QR codes. Many of you are probably familiar with these. If you're not, chances are you've probably seen them around, maybe in magazines or on billboards, etc. What we're going to use QR codes for is a quick way to basically trigger mobile content on users' devices. So in essence, once we've created blog posts that are formatted and ready to go for mobile devices, we'll actually set those up to be triggered in the gallery space using these QR codes. So there's a lot of debate around QR codes, how much longer they're really going to stay around, that they're not all that gorgeous to look at. However, QR codes right now solve a fairly practical problem in a relatively reliable way, which is to say, most Android phones already have QR code readers built in. A lot of people using iOS devices have downloaded plenty of QR code readers. And what we can do is we can basically print QR codes directly onto gallery labels with a normal printer, so that we can actually use these to trigger content on mobile devices without having to put in additional technology that costs a lot more, like RFID tags or NFC chips or anything like that. QR codes are a really sort of low rent way to solve this problem, but a fairly reliable way. So then the real heavy lifting is going to happen using this service that I've listed on the left here, which is IFTTT, or if this then that. This is a solution that basically allows us to aggregate services together and do data transformation. So a lot of the stuff that we described as our primary goals for this solution will be handled in IFTTT. This will be where we're taking content that's uploaded to Flickr and posting it automatically to our WordPress site, and then posting comments from WordPress to our Tumblr diary. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So in order to make this really all come together and work properly, we need to identify what our production workflow is going to look like. So this is an important part of the process in the sense that we need to do a lot of the heavy lifting for understanding how all of these pieces are going to work together before we really do any of the design or development work. So the advantage here is that a lot of this work can be done on paper and in a relatively low cost and quick way. So you'll see here I put together a couple of kind of sample workflow maps, and here you can see we've identified in orange the things that are done manually, and in green the things that are done automatically, with IFTTT as our service being listed there in the middle as the thing that causes the green stuff to happen. So this is an example of our image workflow. So we've uploaded an object image to Flickr. We tag that image as ready. We want to have our if this then that service automatically add that image to our Facebook page, and then simultaneously create a draft post in WordPress. We'll then publish our WordPress post and have that automatically create a notification in Tumblr, and then we're going to create our QR code and post that in the gallery. So the idea here when we look at our production workflow is to try and have as many kind of green squares as we can and as few orange squares as we can. Again, part of this is for scalability, to ensure that if we add a lot more assets or if we have a lot more interactions, that doesn't suddenly require a whole bunch of manual interaction on the part of already overworked staff. So here we also want to figure out what our user workflow looks like. What do our users do, and then what is the output of that? So here again, we've got sort of blue squares detailing what the visitor does, green squares detailing what happens automatically, and then orange squares showing the pieces that involve manual response or manual interaction on the part of our staff. So here's an instance where we have just a sample user workflow. We have a visitor in the gallery. They are looking at a WordPress post about an object, having triggered that with a QR code reader. They add a comment to that post using the Ask a Curator tag. That comment is immediately posted to our Tumblr diary, creating an RSS notification that goes to you, the project owner, just so you're aware. But then automatically also a notification email goes to the curator. The curator posts a response in WordPress, then that comment is automatically posted to Tumblr, and then Tumblr itself may post a tweet about the comment saying that, oh, Ask a Curator has responded. So this is just a sample workflow, but again, we're trying to have the most green squares and the fewest orange squares in response to visitor activity. Here's some additional user workflow, very similar. This is with our visitors uploading Instagram photos and SoundCloud recordings. very similar. These are posted automatically to Tumblr, and then RSS notifications go to you, the project owner, so you know, and then Tumblr would post a tweet about those things. That sort of begins our social interaction. So let's set up our content services initially. So here I'm going to share my screen real quick just to kind of show you what we're doing here. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to actually use Flickr as our primary asset repository. So we're going to upload images of like this Richard Serra right here. We have set up a blog on WordPress.com. This took about 5 minutes to set up and get ready to go. You can see we've already got some test
Koven
posts in here already. And then we're also setting up our Tumblr blog as well. And this is going to be where our ongoing diary of interactions go. And you can see we've already got a few test posts in here. You can see that we've had a comment from a curator go in. We have an indication that a new object has gone onto our blog. We have a few test posts, or a few posts from audio posts from visitors and some images from visitors as well. Now the big piece, as I mentioned, is IFTTT, or if this then that. So there are a number of services like this. I like this one. I find it's very straightforward and very easy, but there are others out there like Zapier, Z-A-P-I-E-R, that also do similar things. But IFTTT works very nicely with the kind of content that we're dealing with. So you can see here the way this service works is it allows you to basically create recipes. And what recipes are basically services where you're taking an existing service like Flickr or WordPress or Tumblr, and you're doing something with that and creating and causing another thing to happen. Literally, if this thing happens, then do this other thing. You can see here I've already set up a couple of recipes for us that are enabling some of the interactions that we've described. So let me kind of break this down a little bit and show you exactly how this works. So let's look at this first recipe here, which is, I'm going to full screen this. So, which is, we're saying anytime a new image is added to Flickr, then we want to automatically create a post on our WordPress blog. So again, we add an image here. We should see that image show up here. So let's look at how that happens. So you can see what we've done here is we're creating a service that says any new public photo on my photo stream should automatically create a photo post on the WordPress blog. So now what IFTTT allows us to do is really format at a very granular level how we want those things to work. So we say whenever an image is added to Flickr, we want to do something very specific. So in this case, we're going to create a photo post on our WordPress blog. The title, and so you can see here's how this works. We say if we wanted to have the title of the post be the same as the title of the image, we click this, we select an ingredient from Flickr. In this case, we're using photo title, saying add ingredient. Eliminate the original one there. And we're going to also add, in a similar fashion, the source URL for the photo. And then here in the caption, the actual blog post itself, we've included the description from the Flickr page. So again, this was just done in very much the same way. We used photo description, added the ingredient. We're going to add this into the object category. And then we're going to add some tags as well. So in this case, if when we uploaded the image to Flickr, tags were added to the image, those would automatically go into the WordPress post as well. So the last thing we're able to do is select the post status. So right now, we could say that anytime an image is uploaded to Flickr, a blog post is created automatically. Right now, we've actually set this up instead to save it as a draft. Part of the reason for that is because we want to actually check to see how this works initially and to make sure that everything's formatted the way it should be. If once we get this kind of worked out and everything seems to be working fine, I would probably change this recipe from save as draft to publish immediately. Which would make things just work a little bit more autonomously without us having to do any manual intervention. And so actually just for demonstration purposes right now, I'm actually going to change this to publish immediately. And so we're going to update this. I'm going to, in Flickr, I know this photo was already on there, but I'm going to just add this anyway. We're going to upload this image, Richard Serra piece from the Museum of Islamic Art in Qatar. As you can see, the title is already here, Sarah. I'm going to change this. I'm just going to say, we're going to add a brief description. Okay. And for now, I'm going to add a tag. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to upload this photo into my photo stream. So if all went according to plan, hopefully our recipe would create a post automatically. So IFTTT will basically listen on these channels and will do these automatically, usually checking about every 5 minutes or so. We're actually going to check this right now, just to see if it worked. It looks like maybe it didn't. Sometimes it takes a little while. And so, yeah, we may have to come back to this to see if it worked later. But this is in a nutshell how all of these services work. So we use something like IFTTT to basically enable exactly these kind of things. So let's look at some of the other recipes that I've created here. So I'm just gonna, yeah. So additionally, I have a few other recipes here. So one of the things that we'd identified was that we wanted to know anytime a user added a comment tagged Ask a Curator to the WordPress blog, that would then also go to our Tumblr diary. So the recipe works very much in the same sort of way, which is we've gone to our WordPress blog, looked at the RSS feed for comments, which is this right here. And then we've also indicated a search term. We're saying anytime you see this, Ask a Curator with a hashtag there in the comments feed, now I want you to do this. So in this case, what this is that we would like it to do, or rather that we would like it to do, is to post this, this comment to our Tumblr blog. So you can see here we've got an output from that here. This is at the end of the day what that will look like. We've included in this recipe also a URL so that the user can go back and see where that actually happens, where that comment originally came out. So here we can see here's the original comment stream in the Ask a Curator question. So additionally, we've got a couple of other similar recipes here. We've also enabled for the Ask a Curator piece, we've also said anytime that a comment comes in tagged Ask a Curator, that should automatically be sent to the curator's email inbox so that the curator doesn't have to check the blog every 5 minutes to see if there's a new question. So we can also set that up, which is what we have here. And additionally, we now also have our 2 Instagram and SoundCloud posts that are also going to our Tumblr blog. So here you can see we've just set this up as a test using this no filter hashtag. Normally what you might do is you would create a very specific hashtag for the exhibition. You would say anytime you upload a photo with this hashtag, it'll end up on our Tumblr blog, or the Tumblr diary rather. And so this is set up very much in the same way. You can see what the output of these looks like. So we get an image, a caption, and then a link to the original photo itself, and then a time and date stamp with the user's name. So in a nutshell, this is basically how all this works. Okay, good. This actually worked. So it does look like our photo posts did post automatically. Just took a minute for it to update. So so now we have the image that we uploaded plus the description. And then you'll notice down here the tags that we added. Sarah and Work of Art in Flickr also came across here. So also now here we can add comments. If we tag them as Ask a Curator, that whole workflow would be initiated as well. It would go to the curator's Gmail. The post would go straight to Tumblr. So you can see now that we've started to set up these services, this whole thing pretty much works autonomously in general. So the last piece is the in-gallery content triggering via the QR codes. Not going to go too much into this, but let's just, for example's sake, say, so now what we want to do is enable visitors in the gallery space to actually see this post on their mobile phones. So it's relatively straightforward to generate a QR code with that. What we do is we actually just copy the URL from WordPress. We'll just do a Control-C. And then find an online QR code generator. There are a number of them out there. This is one that I like to use. It's a service called Kaiwa. And basically the way it works is you just enter the URL. You say generate a static QR code. And here it is. So what you do at this point is you can just save this image as a JPEG and then incorporate that directly into, copy that image directly onto your exhibition label copy. So it's relatively straightforward. And basically we're sort of using this as the triggering mechanism for all of these other workflows that we've now designed and modeled inside IFTTT. So I'm going to go back to my slides here. So now at this point, what we've really done is now that we've set up these services and created IFTTT recipes to move the data around, we really just kind of sit back and watch it all happen. Really, in order to make this strategy work, with no resources. The real beauty of this is that we've really kind of front-loaded all the labor at the beginning of the process so that once we set it all up, it just sort of happens on its own. Anytime you upload an image into Flickr, it propagates through Tumblr, through WordPress. Anytime a comment is added and tagged appropriately, that will propagate through Tumblr. It'll send notifications to your curator automatically. So here's really kind of the summary of what we've done here. As I said, we've front-loaded the labor. We know that these recipes will all continue to work even if we were to go from having, as I said earlier, 2 interactions today to 2,000 interactions a day. We know that it'll continue to work. We can always scale this upwards pretty much automatically as needed. And then in addition, we can also, if we find that this is successful, we can add more services if we want. So there's, a lot that we could do that we haven't done yet. We could send posts automatically to Twitter. We can send things to Facebook automatically. We can have interactions on Twitter filter their way back to our WordPress blog. There's all sorts of things that we can do here. And that's really the advantage and the beauty of this approach, is that ultimately, even though you're working with fewer resources than maybe you would like, by being smart and creative, we can really create a solution that actually might work better than something that was kind of custom built and designed with a lot of staff interaction and sort of a high touch approach. Here's my contact information if you have any further questions. Usually the easiest way to reach me is via Twitter. I'm 5EasyPieces. But if you have specific questions, definitely feel free to contact me at my email address there.
Can you hear me, Koven?
So, thank you.
To wrap up today's webinar, I want to thank our speaker,
Yeah.
Koven Smith, on behalf of the NMC and MIDEA for taking time to present his take on creating spectacular digital interpretive projects with limited resources. And thanks to the Edward and Betty Marcus Foundation for sponsoring this event. Participants, if you want to learn more information on anything you saw or heard today, let us know by dropping in your email address in the chat window or contacting us directly. You can contact me at alex@nmc.org. To learn more about future MIDEA Connect sessions and to get involved in our community, please visit our website at midea.nmc.org. Like us on Facebook, friend us on Twitter at Marcus Institute. You can also access the slideshow on our SlideShare account, as well as the webinar archive on the MIDEA website. See you next time.